Coming up on tonight's This Week in Politics.
Today in South Dakota, 90% of the people in the ICU did not receive a COVID vaccine.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem in a new commercial pointing out the overwhelming occurrence of new COVID-19 infections among the unvaccinated. Also,
since Democrats decided to go it alone, they will not get Senate Republicans' help with raising the debt limit.
Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says if Democrats want to raise America's debt limit, they will not get help from Republicans. If that limit doesn't increase, the American economy could default. And
these decisions end up being, in many cases, family decisions, personal decisions.
ABC News asked South Dakota Senator John Thune if he's going to run for re-election. You'll hear more of Thune's response coming up tonight. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. Thank you for being with us this evening. We are going to begin here with America's debt limit. That's the amount of money the United States can legally borrow to keep the country running. The current debt limit is $28.4 trillion. The way things stand, if that limit isn't increased by October 1st, the United States would default on its debt, the federal government would shut down, federal employees wouldn't be paid, and federal benefits like Social Security and food stamps would not be paid out. Here's U.S. Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer.
Should Republicans careen our country towards a default, our country could actually be plunged into recession, laying off millions, making it harder for people to pay for the food on the table and their mortgages and their rents.
Now, the reason Schumer is mentioning Republicans in that soundbite is because Republicans are saying if Democrats want to raise the debt limit, they'll have to do it on their own because the GOP will not help them. Here's Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Since Democrats decided to go it alone, they will not get Senate Republicans' help with raising the debt limit. I've explained this clearly and consistently for over 2 months. Democrats decided to govern alone. Their unified democratic government must put basic governing duties ahead of partisan wish lists. If they don't, the consequences for our country would be catastrophic.
House Speaker Democrat Nancy Pelosi wants to find a bipartisan solution to the debt limit. Pelosi wrote a letter to Democratic lawmakers saying she expects debt limit deliberations to be bipartisan once more. That's a reference to the fact that it has been raised in a bipartisan way since 2011. Here's White House spokesperson Jen Psaki.
Shutdowns are incredibly costly, disruptive, and damaging. Direct public health efforts can generally proceed during a shutdown because they're exempt, and that is certainly our intention. But large swaths of the federal government coming to a screeching halt would certainly not be beneficial to pandemic response. But we are doing everything we can to mitigate.
The Republican stance of doing nothing to assist in raising the debt limit didn't sit very well with Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, who told reporters they were responsible for increasing the national debt during the Trump administration, and they should now do their part to make sure the U.S. economy doesn't default.
This is a new low in the United States Senate, a new low. The United States has never defaulted on its debt in our history. That's why we enjoy the reputation we do around the world as a responsible nation. This tactic by the Republicans is just pointless and ruthless and is going to hurt a lot of innocent people. What are they thinking? They voted for the spending bills. Now they won't be held accountable for them when it comes to the debt ceiling. These were bills incurred during the Trump administration. And the Republicans are now saying, oh, we voted for the bills and we voted for the spending, but we won't accept responsibility for it. That is totally irresponsible.
In Washington, there's continued debate about new voting laws enacted by states that some claim make it more difficult for minorities to vote. Senate Minority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell said this week on the floor of the Senate that he believes it would be possible for Republicans and Democrats to come together and help states shore up their election laws.
The Senate is fully capable of taking landmark bipartisan action that makes it easier to vote and harder to cheat.
The states where these new laws are in place are Republican states, and the argument is that the changes overwhelmingly affect minority voters by requiring proof of ID that many people in communities of color might not have, like driver's licenses. This week, Texas Senator Ted Cruz was challenged by University of Southern California law professor Fernita Tolson about that state's history of election laws unfairly targeting minorities. Cruz asked her if she believes voter ID laws are racist.
So it depends. One thing we have to stop doing is treating all voter ID laws as the same.
Okay, so your answer, I want to move quickly, so it depends is your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Okay, so what voter ID laws are racist?
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is racist.
You just said my state of Texas, so you tell me, what about the Texas voter ID laws is racist?
So the fact that the voter ID law was put into place to diminish the political power of Latinos with racist intent and had been found to have
You're
racist
asserting
intent.
that. What's your evidence for that?
The federal district court that first resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Twice, courts have found a 2011 Texas election law was passed with the intent of putting Latino voters, traditionally Democrats, at a disadvantage and making it more difficult specifically for them to vote. When This Week in Politics continues on KSFY, Governor Noem is on the air with a new commercial talking about COVID-19 and vaccinations. And South Dakota's medical marijuana program was to have been up and running last July. It's not. And it's been 5 months since the South Dakota Supreme Court heard arguments about the legality of recreational marijuana. On both of these issues, advocates are asking, what's taking so long? And welcome back to This Week in Politics on KSFY.
Today in South Dakota, 90% of the people in the ICU did not receive a COVID vaccine.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem appearing in a new public service announcement encouraging South Dakotans to consider the COVID-19 vaccine.
Today in South Dakota, 90% of the people in the ICU did not receive a COVID vaccine. Keep that in mind when you're making your personal choice, whether to get vaccinated or not.
The governor goes on to promote a monoclonal antibody treatment, which is a form of COVID-19 treatment delivered to higher risk people after they are diagnosed with the illness. It is free in South Dakota, but requires a doctor signing off on needing it. The White House says they have continued concerns about the rising number of COVID cases, not only in the U.S., but worldwide as well. This week, the president announced the United States would be sending 500 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to countries who need the vaccine, but don't have the means to get it.
While vaccinating the world is the ultimate solution to COVID-19, we know that we have to act to save lives now. That's why the United States is providing nearly $1.4 billion to reduce COVID-19 deaths and mitigate transmission through bulk oxygen support, expanded testing, and strengthening healthcare systems and more.
The American Rescue Plan allocated $350 billion for eligible state, local, and tribal governments to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. But South Dakota is one of only 13 states not using those dollars for programs. While most states are deciding how to spend funds either by state lawmakers or governors, South Dakota's approach is a combination of both. State Senator Jean Hunoff says her focus is on making wise financial decisions that are sustainable. One of the challenges is what Hunoff describes as an ever-changing list of rules on how that money can be spent.
And then there's a new FAQ, or frequently answered question, that comes out, and then we have to come back and find out how that impacts it.
In South Dakota, some ideas under consideration include using the money to improve infrastructure, health services, and housing. Medical marijuana has been legal in South Dakota for nearly 3 months now, but the wait continues for a Supreme Court decision on recreational marijuana. The group, South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws, gathered the petitions to have those measures added to the ballot last year. Neither program has gotten off the ground yet, and that's leading to frustration for advocates. As we all wait for South Dakota's Supreme Court ruling on whether Amendment A is constitutional, the group is already planning what its next steps will be.
If we win the Amendment A case and the South Dakota Supreme Court says, look, this does not violate the single subject rule, then we're in good shape. There's no need to change it. It's being interpreted the way it's supposed to. But if the single subject rule is used to overturn Amendment A, we have a problem, and the only way to fix it is to repeal the single subject rule.
Marijuana advocates have already submitted 4 new marijuana-related initiated measures as a proactive effort in case the Supreme Court does rule against Amendment A. When This Week in Politics continues on KSFY, ABC News asked South Dakota Senator John Thune if he's running for re-election. You will hear his answer. And this man says he's considering a run for Texas governor. Who he is when we come back. And welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. South Dakota Senator John Thune has been in the U.S. Senate since 2005, but some are wondering if his time in Washington might not be winding down. Senator Thune has been in the Senate for 16 years and is the second highest ranking Republican there, behind Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. In April, Thune told Politico that since he's arrived, he believes the Senate has gone downhill, adding that it would be difficult for Republicans to gain control of the Senate in 2022. This week, Thune was asked on ABC if he plans on running for re-election.
And there are a lot of factors that weigh into that. I've been doing this for some time. It's a long ways from home from South Dakota, and my wife and family are back there. And so these decisions end up being, in many cases, family decisions, personal decisions, and decisions about where you think you can make the biggest difference. And so all of that weighs into it.
As they say on that, stay tuned. Matthew McConaughey contemplating changing careers. The actor said during a podcast this week that he's considering running for governor in his home state of Texas. If McConaughey does run, he could face Democrat Beto O'Rourke and current Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Texas voters will decide on their next governor during the midterm elections that come up next year. The first round of subpoenas have been issued by the Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot on Capitol Hill. 4 former Trump staffers have been subpoenaed for private depositions and records. Former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, former advisor Steve Bannon, and Kash Patel, a former Chief of Staff to then Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. Not receiving a subpoena yet, House Minority Leader Republican Kevin McCarthy, who reportedly talked with then President Trump on the phone as the January 6th riot was happening, asking Trump to tell his supporters to stop what they were doing.
The January 6th Select Committee has said that they could issue subpoenas as soon as this week. If you're among the group who is subpoenaed either for your information or for an interview, how will you respond to that subpoena, and are you advising your fellow members of Congress that could face subpoenas as to how they should respond?
You know, I haven't received any subpoena, but it just goes to show this is more about politics than anything else. There's only 2 questions that this committee should actually be looked upon. Why was the Capitol left so ill-prepared, and how can we make sure that this never happens again?
And that does it for This Week in Politics. I'm Brian Allen. Thank you for joining us tonight. We do hope to see you again next Sunday night at 10:30. And as always, from all of us to all of you, good night now from Courthouse Square.